All right, everybody, it appears the Google Hangout is live. Because I shifted a day, it is uncertain whether you can hear me or not because I don't have my cohort Zane paying attention to that kind of thing for me. So hopefully we're having absolutely no technical difficulties at the moment, but I'm going to keep an eye on the comments as we claim that we usually do. So if you have anything to say or share or criticize or ask or abuse or whatever, go ahead and type it in the comment box. I'm only paying attention to the one on YouTube, unfortunately, because I don't have Zane to keep a track of every comment thread that exists for this particular episode. It is Friday, August 1st, 2014, which is a day later than we normally record, but I did a webinar for my cult leader group on Wednesday, and my throat was feeling pretty bad on Thursday, and I don't want to push it and make me lose my voice, so I took it easy on Thursday when we normally record live episodes of this show, and decided to roll it over to today. So don't be too mad at Zane for not being able to make it, because he's got other stuff to do. It's Friday, after all. Hopefully you're doing well. I am, as always, the Reverend Dr. Sir Colin D. Terrio, Pontifex Maximus of the worldwide secretive organization known as the Cult of Copy. It's not that secretive. We're on Facebook. If you go to cultofcopy.com, which URL you should see below my name there, you can join our group as long as your Facebook profile doesn't look super spammy or weird or anything like that. I will normally let you in. We are dedicated to discussing the finer arts of persuasion, and particularly as they apply to marketing, but also more in general. But today's episode of the Cult of Copy show is going to be specifically about marketing. Namely, we're going to talk about 13 things that any offer that you're trying to get someone to buy something from you, or if you wrote an offer for a client, whatever the case may be, if you're trying to have a persuasive message where you want people to give you money in exchange for something you give to them, these 13 elements are going to be very useful to you. Guaranteed, pretty much guaranteed. The way I came about this list is through years of writing copy and also consulting and critiquing other people's copy. This list is sort of compiled of all the things that I see over and over that people leave out or don't give enough emphasis to. And if you are an owner of my sales letter template, which members of the Cult of Copy can buy, sorry about that. There we go. Hopefully that's better. If you're a member of the group and you bought that template, you're going to recognize some of these things because they're all elements contained in that template, though when we talk about them today, we're not going to talk about them in any particular order. These items are also beneficial because you don't have to be a super clever writer or anything to really implement them. They're all things that are sort of very easy for anyone to add in, like building blocks. So if you left any of these building blocks out, it should be fairly easy to just sort of plug them into your offer wherever you may have missed out and get the full benefit and increased conversions. Every instance that I've done this has had that effect. You know, no one's ever complained or lost sales because of any of these things I'm going to tell you to add today. Let's see. Talked about the show. No, I talked about the cult. I talked about me. The show, like I said, we're recording Friday. Typically, new episodes of the show are recorded Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. If you want to join our hangout and jump in with us, you're welcome to do so. All cult members and even the public are invited. Typically, like I said, we record on Tuesdays. Yesterday was an exception. Even if you miss Tuesdays, you can get the recordings from our YouTube channel, which is at youtube.com/cultofcopy. All previous episodes are there. This happens to be episode 16, I think. So there are at least 15 numbered episodes already in that channel, plus an episode 0. Soon we will be turning the show into a podcast as well, audio-only podcast. That's still in the works. mostly because it relies on me, and I work very slowly. That's just how I am. Um, that's all I got for you as far as warm-up material for this week. I did not really, like I said, I had that big webinar to do on Wednesday, and really paid attention to anything out in the real world in the marketing space uh, in order to get a little topical current event pop culture tidbit to share with you guys like I normally do. It's been a pretty tiring week there. Oh, look at that. My wife just brought me a coffee. Thank you. I love you. Be very beneficial for me to have this coffee because I had three margaritas at lunch. It's Friday. I told you it's Friday. You're supposed to be having a good time. So like I said, I don't have any current event things to jump into this week, but that's okay because we have 13 big chunky things to discuss, and I'm pulling up my notes right here so we can dive right into it. Let me check the comment screen here just to make sure no one is saying anything to me. It does not appear so, but if you have a message for me, please go ahead and put it into the comments on the YouTube page, and I will keep an eye on those to answer during the show or at the end of the show, whichever I manage to get to. All right, so here we go. 13 things that you had better add to your sales page unless you don't like making more money. Like we already talked about, the way I got this list is through looking at hundreds and hundreds of sales pages and looking at the things that I know will boost conversion that a lot of people tend to leave out. Now, if you've been in marketing for a while, none of these are going to be any surprise to you. You're going to hear them and be like, oh yeah, obviously. But I challenge you this. Does your sales page have these items? If not, try adding them. That's all I ask, is that you at least try to add them and test. Because if you don't have these items, chances are you're leaving some money behind on the table, as they say, leaving money on the table. But yeah, they should all be very, very easy to test. They're very simple to implement. And even though you hear it and say, oh yeah, okay, whatever, sure, that sounds fine, be aware that if your page doesn't have it, you have no reason to complain that you've heard these before. So, number one, the biggest, most obvious one, I'm trying to do this thing where I look at my web camera, but because Zane's not here, I compulsively keep looking at my own face on the screen. So if you're listening to this on audio, it won't matter to you at all, but if it looks weird with my eyeballs looking different places, sorry. It's because Zane's not here and I have to look at my own ugly mug as well as my notes. It's distracting me. Maybe it's distracting you. First thing, number one thing that you need to add to your offer if you want it to convert more is a bonus. The trick with bonuses is people like to get stuff, right? And if they buy your product and you're selling it in the right way, what they're getting from you is a solution to a problem that they have. What a bonus should do, first let me tell you the way people use bonuses wrong. A lot of times what people do with bonuses is they will try to do what's called kitchen sinking. And affiliates who throw bonuses into a primary offer in order to sell more than other affiliates are particularly guilty of this. What happens is they do what's called kitchen sinking. They throw everything that they possibly can in as a bonus, so that the cash value, perceived value of the bonus far exceeds any value that they would place in the initial item, which is fine if all you care about is making sales on that particular item, because that will maximize sales. They're getting a ton of stuff for free just for buying this thing that they don't really care about. But that's the key. If it's your product, if it is something you care, if they get value from that main item, don't devalue it by kitchen sinking a bonus. You want a bonus that's going to be tightly related and really enhances the value of the actual thing that they're buying in the first place, right? But that said, it's important that your bonus have some kind of tangible cash value. It helps if it's an item that's for sale on its own. If you don't have a bonus ready to go, one thing you can do is create products in the quote-unquote FIDIL, FIDDLE, aka that's an acronym for Fuck It, Do It Live, style of product creation that I talk about, which is you sell attendance to a live event that hasn't occurred yet. You just get people to buy a ticket, and then you hold the live event on a certain date. That's a quick thing to throw in if you're doing a launch and you don't have a bonus ready to go. That one actually works really well because what it allows people to do is get a little bit of personal interaction for their money, but it's positioned as a bonus, meaning that they don't presume personal interaction is expected, and that can actually help you on the customer service side of things. Another way to do a bonus, if you don't have one, is to take maybe a non-critical, non-vital part of the main offering, if this makes sense, break it off and describe it and deliver it as if it's a bonus or a piece of additional content. Again, the whole point of describing something as a bonus is that they're getting a little bit extra in addition to what it is that you're actually asking them to buy. So even if the way you built it, it's part of that offer, it really won't hurt anything if you take it away and describe it as a bonus that is something that they're getting above and beyond. Again, because the whole expectation of whether it's included or it's an additional bonus is really semantic. It really depends on the way that you describe it, right? So bonuses, you want to have a bonus. Let's see. And again, these are in no particular order. If you are a customer of my sales letter template, these are delivered in a certain order as part of that particular sales argument. I don't know what the structure of your existing sales offer is, so it's hard for me to say what the right offer would be for if you're going to cram multiple of these into your letter. But they will all work no matter which order you put them in, if that makes sense. So they're in no particular order. I just want to say that. I'm going to go through a list of 13. You do not have to put them in this order that they appear here. Second one, let's see. Limitations. If your offer has any kind of limitations, meaning it is only available for a limited time, or you only have a limited number of spots available, or does the price go up every few sales, something like that. Anytime there's some sort of limiting factor that would make them have to make a decision to buy now versus stopping to think about it even for a little bit. Anything that falls into that category would count as a limiting factor, and you're going to want to stress that as strongly as you possibly can. So, for example, if you mention the bonus and you say the bonus is going to go away after X amount of time, that is a very easy limiting factor to throw in if you only threw in the bonus to increase conversions. Those work in a 1-2 combination if you do it that way. That's another way. But what happens when you give people a limiting factor, like we said, it gives them pain. It causes some loss for them to say maybe or I'll decide later. You want to force them to make a decision while they are on the page reading it. You want them to say yes or no. You don't want them to say yes or maybe and I'm going to come back later. Just push them as hard as you can. Make sure that they know that there are teeth. They're going to lose something if they don't get off the fence as soon as possible. Then we have proof. Proof is often overlooked when making a sales letter. I'm not saying you have to have some crazy scientifically vetted, like, perfectly detailed test results unless you are in a field where the government of the place where you're selling your item requires that you have that kind of proof. I'm not a lawyer. I can't say if that's something you have to have. That will be up to you as the business owner, of course. But whatever proof you can muster, if you're saying this item that I want you to buy from me is a solution to this specific problem, some element of proof that this actually works would be great. Ideally, if you could do a live demonstration in some kind of way, that demonstrates, yes, this literally works exactly the way I'm claiming that it does. If you can show them, picture is worth 1,000 words. That is why infomercials are so effective if they can demonstrate the item in front of you. Ron Popeil in particular is an infomercial pioneer. You may know him as the promoter of the Pocket Fisherman. I can't remember what the product's called, but it was like some kind of spray paint to cover your bald spot. He made that. He made the Showtime Rotisserie Gold. Longtime veteran. In fact, the product that he got to start selling was something his dad, quote unquote, invented, which is that little jar with the little slap chop kind of pokey thing at the top that chops things up. Been selling that since like the 60s or something. It's bananas. I got his biography. You should check it out if you can. Anyways, the point with Ron Popeil is that he got his start doing demos of these products live and in person in department stores. So he would have a little demo table set up. As the people would walk by doing their shopping business, he would pull them aside and do this demonstration with this little chopping device. Demonstration being key to making the sale. If you can show people exactly what your product does and demonstrate that it works, they don't have to take your word for it, right? Like, they don't have to trust you. They can trust their own eyes, which they are much more inclined to trust than just trusting anything that you say, which again is why proof, if you have proof that you can show that the claims that you are making are accurate, at least a little bit, that's a huge benefit to you. Another thing to keep in mind is that if results vary, give a range from the low-end result to the high-end result, especially if the cost that you're asking justifies even the low-end result. Then you would show the range, and I will say, to be fully, ethical and upfront, if it's possible to buy your product and get zero result, absolutely none, you paid for it, just might not work at all. That kind of thing happens. Admit that that is the case and remind them that if that happens, they can get a refund according to your guarantee policy, which coincidentally is another item we're just about to talk about. So the next thing that we can talk about adding into your offer to make sure that people get it is a guarantee. Give one. Most of the time, your merchant provider by law is, depending on where you sell, again, I'm not a lawyer, so anything I say by law, you should consult with competent and licensed expert advice. But most of the time, by law, your merchant provider is required to offer customers the option of canceling or refunding or charging back anything that they feel where they were ripped off in any kind of way, right? And depending on the way the purchase is made is whether you as the seller or they as the customer are going to get the benefit of the doubt. Regardless, you're probably required to give some kind of guarantee policy in some kind of way, depending. Again, look into it. I don't know. That's too many variables available. If you're required to anyway, just go ahead and be explicit about it. Give them the guarantee that you are required to by your merchant provider, because then you look like the good guy for offering it. You have to offer it anyway, but instead of letting them go check it out, you put it out there up front. You let them know, hey, this is available to you. It's a safety net. And that's really the trick with a guarantee. A guarantee doesn't even have to be money back. It can be anything back. It could be a partial guarantee. It could be, cancel at any time and keep everything we've sent you up to that point. Anything that provides a safety net. The whole point of a guarantee is that it is risk reversal. So as long as you remember to describe any guarantee that you have for them from the perspective of any risk that you're taking by giving me money is somewhat mitigated by this promise I'm making to you. And then you want to let them know that it's a guarantee of some kind, because people do have the understanding that if you're making them a guarantee in an advertisement, you are somewhat legally obligated to fulfill that. They know you can't just flat out lie when you make a stern, clear promise in your advertisement. So considering you may be required to have one anyway because of your merchant provider, you may as well extend that to the audience and get the goodwill that comes from having done that. What else? What else? Closes. Closes are another good one. I'm gonna let's see. I'm gonna check the comments. It looks like I have one. Robert Michon asks, which of these items is your offer missing? Okay. Yeah, ask yourself that. I'm sorry, it's been 10 minutes. I can't remember what the context of that comment would have been. Closes. Closes is the next one we're going to talk about. Everyone knows what a close is when you're making a sales offer, right? It's when you explicitly close the deal and ask people to give you money. It's when you're really saying, hey, now's the time to make the decision whether you're going to give me some money or you continue to have a conversation or a relationship or whatever, or else you say no and then we're done, right? It's cut off after that point. The thing with a close, what I notice the most when reviewing other people's copy is people tend to make one close. They close at the very end. They give their whole pitch. They close once and that's it. I don't know about you, but a lot of times I might not even notice that you're trying to close if I'm paying attention to the thing that it is that I'm interested in, which is the spiel, the item that you're putting in front of me, right? So the trick with closes, anytime I write a letter or I review a letter, what I recommend is at least 3 closes, more if they make sense. As long as it makes sense from the information that you know you've delivered to the customer up to that point, for you to ask for the sale explicitly, for you to ask for them to give you money, it's fine to make a close. In fact, for a lot of the launches I've worked on that had a lengthy and well-viewed pre-sale sequence, we went ahead and put a close directly at the top of the sales letter with the presumption that you've seen enough and you know if you're ready to buy without even reading the whole sales letter. You know you want it. Go ahead and grab it now. If not, keep reading. You don't have to do that every time, but this idea of doing multiple closes is very, very valuable. What I recommend is people do an emotional close, a logical close, and a fear-based close in that order. I'm not going to go into too much detail into it because we have a lot to cover and we're almost halfway through the show. But when you hit at least those 3 points, you want your multiple closes to hit different angles, try and take different approaches, try and reinforce different arguments, because each close is going to get a different person, right? But if you do more than one, you're more likely to get more sales, the same way as if you make an offer multiple times to the same audience, you will get more sales because some people are sitting on the fence. Same thing, if they're reading one sales piece and you make more than one close, you're going to pick up more people than you would have if you only did the one. It's math. Math and science. I'm also not a mathematician or a scientist, so don't quote me on that. What else do we got? Let's see. Acknowledgement. Yummy. Acknowledgement is when you're basically talking to your audience and you're acknowledging that they exist as a person, right? They are a person with a real life that has a real problem that is a burden to them and they don't like it. You're acknowledging their existence. You're acknowledging their state of mind. You're not just throwing something in their face and hoping they happen to be the right person for it. Another way to do acknowledgement is to say, look, I recognize you're a busy person, and I thank you for taking the time to listen to this message that I came here to tell you about today. That's acknowledgement, right? Acknowledgement works really well in an offer, particularly the kind of offers I used to work on, which are not entirely cold traffic. They're either people that the seller sent to their own sales message, or else there's an affiliate relationship where the seller is being vouched for by a third party to their own audience. So if I said, hey, my buddy is selling this thing and I think it's great, you guys should go check it out, that would be a vouching situation. So these items that I worked on, the audience was somewhat warmed up. But even then, acknowledgement works because it helps, even though it's a general broad message, there's only one message to however many hundreds or thousands or maybe even millions of people are going to view that message. It feels customized because you're acknowledging that, hey, I know you as a real person are watching this. It snaps them out of that idea that it's not a conversation, right? Like if you just read something and there's no acknowledgement whatsoever, it's just words on a page, there's no direct connection. But if you take the time to make that acknowledgement and recognize that there's a real person with a real problem, a real day-to-day existence that exists outside of this conversation we're having, if you acknowledge that, it makes the message feel more personal, more deep. It creates a deeper connection, and they're more likely to read it and absorb it and reflect on it in a genuine way, rather than just treating it like any other advertisement. Again, I want to remind everybody I'm keeping an eye on the YouTube comments. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you have a question, please post it. I'm going to check them periodically. Like, for example, Mike Halperin has made a comment 40 seconds ago, it says. Wow. Mike says, are you modifying these techniques to accommodate the increasingly shorter attention span of prospects? It depends, because a lot of these things are little tidbits that you can drop in that are sort of making a sequenced message be more interesting to people with short attention spans, if that makes sense. So by dropping these different elements, the way I write copy, it's written in chunks, and each of these sections that I'm telling you about here might be a different chunk. So just when they're getting bored, we're hitting them with some new argument that takes things in a different direction, that keeps the piece interesting even though we're still talking about the same product and we're still keeping them on the same page in order to get them to make a decision to pick it up or not. So in that way, it is sort of tailored to shorter attention spans, but I'm still a firm believer in that if you have something that is interesting to a particular audience, the length of it doesn't matter. So, for example, everyone talks about how people have shorter attention spans because of, internet culture or rapidly edited television or whatever, but at the same time, it seems like movies get longer and longer and longer, and it's because movies have geared themselves towards making these deeper, more involved, engaging experiences, and if the audience likes what the movie is about, they will keep their buns glued to the seat for 3 hours as if it's nothing. Big blockbuster movie tends to run 3 hours now, when even when I was younger, 2 hours was pushing it. Like a movie was typically an hour and a half. But your big epic films now all tend to be very, very long, 2 hours plus. That, to me, says if you cultivate an engaged enough audience, it doesn't matter how long what it is you have to say. Look at novels. Harry Potter books, for example, start out very small, but then they keep getting thicker and thicker and thicker. Even in the movies, the last movie based on the last book is 2 movies, if that makes sense. So there's more movies than there are books for Harry Potter, but it's because if you love it, if you're engaged, if you're invested, it doesn't matter how much time it takes. You're going to give it as much time as it asks for because you want to see it resolved satisfactorily. Now, that applies to entertainment, but I, being biased as a creator of advertising, tend to think if the advertising is good enough, if the message is hitting home enough, if it's doing all the things that we're talking about where you keep giving them new reasons to be interested and to continue to want to buy, then they'll keep paying attention as long as you have things to say. At least that's my experience. Hopefully that answers your question. I feel like maybe it did. Maybe it just went on and on. Tim McCauley asked, would these elements be applicable to a service-based business like stand-up paddleboard lessons? Yeah, I think so, because we're talking about an offer, right? What are the things that we've talked about so far? Let me skim back over my list here. It's particularly confusing to me because I wrote the list and then I rearranged it, but I didn't change the numbers, so they're not numbered in the right order. We talked about bonuses. If you're doing stand-up paddleboarding, what else can you give them besides stand-up paddleboard lessons that they get on that day? that would be a bonus. I'm sure there's plenty of things you could think of. Guarantees, you can give a guarantee. Limitations, this offer is only good for a certain number of people or a certain amount of time, blah, blah, blah. Most offers for services are of that variety where they're limited in some kind of way. Doing multiple closes, providing proof that people may actually learn how to do this if they take your lessons. All of those apply, right? All of those will be applicable to any kind of service. It has nothing to do with selling a piece of information or anything. They're generally applicable to any kind of offer. It doesn't even have to be a sales offer. If you take this list and you just want to convince someone to do something for you, like as a person, without saying, hey, you give me money and I give you this item, a lot of these are still applicable, right? Like even a bonus, when you think of being a sales bonus, is a particular thing. But if I say, hey, if you do this favor for me, I'm going to do this favor for you, that's a bonus, right? It's reciprocation. It helps them make the decision to do what it is that you want them to do. Tim's listing bonus, limitation, proof, guarantee, closes. I tell you what, if you're a member of the Cult of Copy, I'll bump the article that this show is based on, because it's based on an older episode of the show. Someone private messaged me and they're like, hey, can you send me that list of 13 things that you said were awesome to do? And I'm like, dude, that's kind of a thing with me. Like, I always write list of 13 things. You're going to have to be more specific. And he's like, it's one about like sales messages, things to add to sales messages. And I'd forgotten I had even written it. I apparently wrote it in November of last year. And it led to this being the topic of today's show. So I'll bump that post, and then you'll have the list of all the items that we're talking about, so you don't have to rely on what I'm saying or taking notes. If I remember correctly, the image that goes with it is of a spice rack. The idea being these are like seasonings that you can add into whatever message you're working on. Does that work, Tim? Hopefully so, because we're going to carry on now. We're halfway through the show, by the way. This is where an advertisement would go. If you want to be a future advertiser on the show, you like the content, you like the audience, you like the stuff we're talking about, you think they would like whatever it is that you sell, get in touch with me when this show turns into a podcast. In the very near future, we're going to offer these advertising spots to the public. You get one in the middle and one at the end, but even when we don't have one, I like to let you know that it's here, so that later on when I add in ads, you don't call me a sellout. You're like, oh, okay, now he's finally got an ad in the ad spot. See? Clever. Conditioning you. But, yeah, we got no ad this time because we delayed the show. It was supposed to be recorded yesterday. What can you do? Testimony. Testimony is another thing you can add. Testimony is really a kind of proof. But what testimony does is it puts any claims you want to make about the quality or even features, certain features and specific benefits of what it is that you're offering. If you can get someone who has bought, who has given you money already to verify and validate that those things are true, that's way more beneficial than anything you could say about it. So add in testimonials. Endorsements are also a special kind of testimonial. Endorsements are when you have a celebrity of some kind or recognized figure in your industry, someone that the audience already looks up to and admires. You have them say something nice about you or your product. That's another distinction to make about testimonials, is that they're not all about the product. They can be about you as the vendor or the product creator, because if you are an integral part of the product, people giving testimony about your reputation is also valuable to their buying decision. So testimonials can be about you. They can be about the creation of the product. They can be about the product itself. They can even be about the buying experience itself. Any of those things that reinforce your audience thinking, okay, well, what they're promising me is true, those are all valuable. If possible, this is another advanced tip, if you can be demographically selective in the portrayal of the people giving you testimonials, for example, if your testimonials come like via Facebook comments and you can pull the pictures that go with them, or if you're getting video testimonials, you want to try and hit as many demographic groups as make sense for what you're offering. So think about how old is the person giving this testimonial? What gender are they? What nationality are they? What experience level? Any of these things that are demonstrable in what they say that give more possible potential customers something to anchor onto and relate to will help you, because that's really what testimonials are there for, is to say, okay, well, that person's like me. They like the product, so therefore I should like the product too. Mike Heath says, I can't stand up for shit on a paddleboard. If you guaranteed that I could, I'd do it. There you go, Tim. That's the guarantee you should make, is that I guarantee you will be able to paddleboard by the end of this lesson, or your money back, or something like that. It doesn't have to be money back, but you get the idea. So that's testimonials. We already talked about acknowledgement. Authority. Authority is another one we're going to want to talk about in your letter. Authority, in any message that you give to an audience as part of an advertising message, it comes from someone. Someone is making them those promises. If you're not explicit about it, it doesn't seem like it comes from anyone. It's just dead words on a page. But that's why a lot of sales letters start with, Dear so-and-so, I am such and such. The reason you're introducing yourself is to give a person a face, a character, a persona behind the words that are coming out. Because if you're making a promise to someone, it's really a lot more beneficial if that promise comes from someone. And if that person has some sort of qualifications that give them an authority on the matter, that makes it that much better. So if you are an authority figure, if you have credentials, if you have achievements, if you have results that make you as the deliverer of this message somehow more trustworthy, more reliable than anyone else that might be making these claims, you need to bring that to your audience's attention. Even if it's just like, this restaurant has been open 10 years and the locals love it. That's a factor. That's important. That lets them know that the person promising them that the food at this place is delicious has reason to believe that. There's evidence. They have been doing it for a while. There's something to build upon, right? That's what authority is when it comes to making these sales offers. Why should they listen to you? Who are you to be talking to them about this particular offer? So in Tim's case, with the paddleboard, how long have you been paddleboarding? How long have you been teaching people to paddleboard? How many people have you successfully taught to paddleboard? All of these things are factors that would give you authority, so that when you say, I guarantee to you, Mike, that you will be able to stand up on this paddleboard and operate it effectively after you take my class, that will have meaning. It will feel like you know what you're talking about and you're not full of shit, because you have credentials to back up what you're saying. That's why it's important to share authority, and that's why it's important to explicitly have an identity on your sales messages that people can relate to and connect to. Because I don't know about you, but if I pick up a random piece of paper from no one that makes me a promise, I don't know who to hold accountable for that promise. I don't know whose reputation is on the line. It's meaningless. It's just words on a page. But if there's a guy there who's got his name and his picture, maybe even he's talking out loud to me on video, if he's making me a promise, I know that if he cares about not being a liar, he's not lying, right? Like, his reputation's associated with it. That means people are more inclined to believe it. That's why it's important to make these authority claims. What else? What else? Pain agitation. So, oops. I'm wobbling now because I kicked the table. A lot of times when people have a product to sell, that product does actually solve a problem that the prospect might have. But for whatever reason, I don't know if it's like conditioning to just be a polite person and to not be rude, people are scared to agitate these problems, to accentuate them, to bring them up. And the trick with problem agitation is that it anchors and reminds them of the need for your solution. The trick with problems that most people have is they suffer them silently. They don't tell anybody about the embarrassment or the anger or the fear or the inconvenience because it's embarrassing. They keep it to themselves, right? So they don't realize that maybe a lot of other people have that problem. So if you give them material that pokes that problem, that reminds them of it, it makes them re-experience that pain, it brings it to the forefront, even if it's just a memory of suffering from that problem. If you bring that memory up, it anchors them and primes them to want the solution to that problem in a way that they wouldn't unless they happen to be feeling that particular pain or discomfort right that minute, which sometimes they are, depending on what you sell. Most of the time, you have to remind them. And the trick, I will share this, the trick with the human brain when it comes to emotions and experiences of feelings, your brain has a really hard time distinguishing between imagination and memory and actual experience of this feeling, which is why a sad movie makes you cry, right? You're not actually sad because of anything that really happened to you. You're sad because your imagination is so powerful you can't help but have the real feelings as if what's happening is real. It's the same thing with a memory. If you think of a sad memory and it makes you cry, it's resurrecting that feeling because your brain literally can't tell the difference between a memory and your imagination and a real feeling. So if you have someone bring up memories of a negative experience that your product solves, and you can help them imagine a scenario where that problem exists, both of those are going to prime them and trigger them so that when you say, hey, I have a solution, it offers immediate relief. Even though it's an imaginary or remembered problem, it still feels painful for them to have that dredged up, which is why pain agitation needs to be part of your offer. Then we have understanding. So we're poking their buttons and saying, hey, this sucks. This really hurts, right? This is painful. Ouch. We're reminding them of all these painful memories and getting them to imagine new painful scenarios that they may never have envisioned on their own. But we're also going to offer them some understanding, some sympathy. We're going to let them know that either we ourselves have had that experience of pain, so we know what it's like. That will help soften it and make it feel like we're not just bullying them for no reason. And it helps put them in the context that if we know what that problem is like and we're offering a solution, the solution must really work. Because we don't just have a solution and have no idea what the problem is like. We know what the problem is really like. So if we say it helps, it should really help because we really, really know what the problem is like. If you can't do that, if you can't connect it directly to your own experience, you want it to be as few steps removed as possible. So if you have a solution that's based on your work with clients and you can't say, I suffered from this problem, you would say something like, well, the number one problem that my clients have is this problem. So I know a lot about it. I've worked with a lot of people. I understand what it feels like to have it. Even the pitch that I gave at the beginning of the show to say I developed this material through looking at hundreds of client letters, that is similar to what I'm saying here. You are showing you have a reason to understand what their problem is really like. They should trust that you know the real struggle, and the presumption will be that if you understand the problem to that degree, the solution you would suggest must address the problem fully, right? The magical trick of this is when you combine understanding like we're talking about now with the pain agitation we just talked about, you're essentially being a diagnostician like Dr. House, which if you ever watch that show House, he can tell you what wackadoo crazy disease that you have, but unless it's the very end of the third act, he's going to be like, I don't know how to cure it. There's no cure. We don't know what to do, right? Just because I can tell you what's wrong with you doesn't mean that I know the cure, but the audience presumes that you do. just because you're so accurate about the problem and so sympathetic and so understanding, when you offer a solution, they will presume without you having to say it that that product must overcome every aspect of the problem that they feel like you've expressed that you understand. And unless there's any reason to divest them of that presumption, they're going to keep it all the way until it comes time to buy, which, as long as you're not lying, why not let them keep that presumption, right? Let's check on the questions. Tim says, I guarantee you can stand up on the paddleboard or the second lesson is on me. That's one way to do it. That'll work. Why not, right? All right, next one. We have, let's see, we did acknowledgement, authority, understanding, pain, agitation. Promises. Too many sellers just plop the solution on the table and expect it to be self-explanatory. If you have a solution that you know works, and we already have the safety net of a guarantee, right? Go ahead and make a solid promise. Put your reputation on the line because you know you're willing to take care of people if it doesn't work out, right? Make a real promise. Promise them that it's going to work. Promise, because that's meaningful to people. They feel like you wouldn't promise if you didn't have their best intentions in mind, right? Like if you're just faking, you wouldn't try and be so earnest. You would try and get them to arrive at their own decision. But if you're explicit, you tell them, I know this solution is going to work. It's worked for tons of other people. It's worked for me. I really believe in it. And I think, I know in my heart that it's going to work for you. And if it doesn't, no hard feelings, just ask for your money back and I'll give it. It feels so earnest. It feels so powerful because you're making a real promise as a real person. And it's one of those things that I don't know. It's not that people don't believe in their own products. I think they're just scared because they feel like making a promise makes people mistrust you. Like you're a trickster and you're just trying to pull the wool over your eyes. When if you put enough of these things in place, it makes a promise feel real. It makes a promise feel genuine, like you really mean it because you put your face on it. You put your voice on it. It's from you. And you're giving them a guarantee. So why not just promise? Be as, not aggressive, but as earnest and for real and confident and superlative. Hey, like I really, really think that this is going to work for you if you're in this situation. I have no reason to believe that it wouldn't. And on the off chance that maybe even it works, but you don't like just one little aspect of it, then you can ask for your money back. No worries, right? That level of promise makes people feel like they can trust you, and it'll make them want to give you their money. We have two more. Price justification. It doesn't matter what your product costs, whatever market you drop it into, if you don't give the audience something to anchor that price against, they'll anchor it against something they already know. And that means either your product is going to be perceived as being high relative to the alternatives, or it's going to be perceived as being priced low relative to the alternatives. No matter what that situation is, whether it's priced more expensive or it's priced lower, it doesn't matter. You need to give them a justification for what that presumption is. So if they presume, oh, well, that's cheap. Why is it so cheap? Before they can even formulate that thought in their head, you need to tell them why it is that your product is cheaper than everything else. And it doesn't have to be like a crazy good reason. We've already talked about on the show and in the cult multiple times about how any reason why, because you can give people is better than having no reason at all. But when you give people a legitimate reason that sounds right, like this is so cheap because it's just a test. We don't know if people are going to buy into this, and we don't want people to overextend themselves. We want to see what kind of value that they're going to get first. And then once we see their results, we're going to raise the price accordingly. That makes sense. You're like, yeah, okay, I get it. Doesn't matter. Well, again, I'm not a lawyer. Check with your legal counsel before making any advertising claims. But it doesn't matter if that's true or not from the copywriter standpoint, because it sounds good, right? Like you're letting them know that it's just an experiment. If you're like me, I don't even offer a reason. I just say the price is going to go up because I like to raise my prices on things. That's how I keep making more and more money. It's one of the things that I teach people to do is raise their prices consistently, proportionally to their reputation and recognition in the marketplace. But if your products are expensive relative to other offerings in the market, again, you need to give justification. What things can you use as justification? Maybe if it comes with a sweet-ass bonus, like we talked about. Maybe if you are a super advanced authority relative to the other sellers in your market, like we talked about. Maybe it's that you have deep personal experience with this problem in a way that other people don't. Maybe it's that you're promising to give them more hands-on interaction. Maybe it's that your guarantee is so killer that you promise that they'll get results or their money back, that you charge a lot. Because if you get the result, that's how much you would have paid to learn it on your own. Any of those things work. A lot of the things on this exact list is what I'm trying to tell you will validate as justifications. You just remind them and say, hey, you might be thinking, wow, that's more than I thought it might be, but let me tell you why it's really not. And then you give them some kind of justification. Doesn't matter what your price is. You need to figure out if they're going to read that price and think, oh, that's expensive, or, oh, that's pretty cheap, before they can formulate, why is it so cheap, or why is this more expensive? Give them the reason. And the more sense the reason makes to them, the better and more easily accepted it will be. And the trick is, if you use any of the justifications that come from elsewhere in the letter, like we're talking about here, they feel like reinforcements. So if you give them all these things like you're an authority figure and you're making a guarantee and you're making really good promises and you have all of this proof and I can't remember if I said you're an advanced authority, all of those things are true, then when you say, here's the price, now you might be thinking that's a little more expensive than I've seen available. Remember, all these other things I told you about this offer. Then they're like, yeah, that makes sense. But it doesn't feel like, well, he just told me that. It doesn't feel like circular logic. It feels like legitimately justified claims. That's awesome. We have 5 minutes left and we only have one more point. Consequences. You got to remind them of the consequences. We already talked about limitations, right? To where one of the limitations can be this bonus is going to go away, or this offer is only for a limited time. Those are built-in consequences. There can be others. The idea is whatever consequences there might be for them leaving this page instead of saying yes or no to buy your item, you need to make that explicit. If they leave this page, is the price going to go up? Are the bonuses going to go away? Is the offer going to degrade in any way? Are competitors going to get a leg up over them? Are they going to end up continuing in a shitty existence that they hate because they've said no to this offer? Whatever it is, whatever consequences there are for saying no and walking away, you want to remind them of those explicitly. So even just to go back to Tim's thing, with the paddleboarding, you can spend another summer wishing you knew how to paddleboard when you see people doing it, and only thinking about the time you maybe tried and failed, or the time that you thought about doing it and didn't do it. Or you can just take me up on this offer now. Remember, it's guaranteed, and I'm an expert. I showed you all this testimonials and proof, and it's guaranteed. So just come try it out. What do you have to lose? That is a way to reinforce the consequences, that they're going to have ongoing shame and embarrassment and sadness for not ever having tried it. Whatever it is that you sell, whatever offer you're making, if there are no consequences for walking away from that offer, it's not a good enough offer, or else you're not creative enough at thinking. Everything has consequences. Even like, I ate at this place for dinner versus that other place. You can create a pretty startling set of consequences that have to come with that, based on like the ingredients, the cleanliness, the friendliness of the wait staff. So even if you work in a restaurant, you can use that one where you're giving them consequences for passing you up on a particular offer. But again, it's you'll notice everything on this list. It's all different angles to sort of stack up people's bundle of reasons to take you up on your offer. And we've talked before about open loops and confounding people where their conscious resistance, their skepticism, their disbelief has to shut down because you've overloaded them with so many things. All these arguments that we've talked about today are essentially an effort to do that, where they're piled up so high, their shopping cart is so full of all of these free things they're going to get to roll out of the store if they just say yes. They have to believe you and say yes, or else if they don't, it feels like they're consciously choosing to give something up, to pass something up, to let something pass them by. And that feels like it hurts a little bit, right? As it should. Again, I don't know you. Maybe you're an evil dick, and you're going to use this to trick people into giving you money and giving them garbage. I would rather you didn't, and especially if you do, don't give me any credit. But methodologies have no intent. So I tend to say if you're good, if you're ethical, if you have products that really do help people, you have a duty to push sufferers of these particular problems that you can solve. You have a duty to push them as hard as you can to get them to buy these solutions. Because like we said, people suffer these problems silently. They keep them to themselves. They just tolerate it instead of fixing it. If you can fix it and offer them real relief, you have a duty to push them as hard as you can to get them to say yes. Because once they say yes, I can't think of any situation where anyone's ever been like, hey, I had this nagging problem and it was really bothering me and I was ignoring it and it was causing me issues and all these other parts of my life. And you came to me with the solution and I bought it from you and it totally worked. It fixed everything. But I wish you wouldn't have pushed it so hard on me. I wish your marketing wouldn't have been so aggressive. I wish you would have let me decide whether I needed it or not, even though it did everything that you said it would do and my life is 100% better. No one's ever going to say that. So if you really have a really good product, don't let people get away with telling you no when you know that you can really help them. That is it. We're at the end of our list. I'm going to double check the questions at the end here just to make sure I didn't miss anybody. But before we do, I'm going to go through my usual spiel because we've hit the end of the show. My name is the Reverend Dr. Sir Colin D. Theriault, Pontifex Maximus and leader of a secretive worldwide organization, almost 10,000 members strong, with representation in 90 countries and all 50 U.S. states and all of our territories. That group is called the Cult of Copy. We are dedicated to the art of persuasion, both written and spoken, particularly with the emphasis on marketing, but not necessarily. So if you are at all interested in the darker side of persuasion and manipulation and tricking people through the use of language, please join our group. You can do that looking at the URL under my name here, cultofcopy.com. We're currently a Facebook group, but soon to be much, much more. If you like this show, I recommend you tune into our YouTube channel and subscribe. It is at youtube.com/cultofcopy. This is episode 16. We have 15 other episodes there, plus an episode 0, so 16 more hours extra of this kind of thing. If you like the topic, please feel free to dig deeply. Subscribe if you want to join in new episodes. New episodes, even though this is a Friday, typically they are recorded Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern live. You can jump in and interact with us the way Tim and Mike and the other Mike and Robert have. If that's not your thing, just watch the recordings. They'll all be cataloged here. If you are more of an audiophile, keep an eye out because soon this show will be an audio-only podcast available on iTunes and Android phones, as well as maybe SoundCloud. I don't know. We're exploring the options. That's why it's taking so long. But if that's your thing, stick around wherever you happen to be listening to this. If you like the content, please subscribe. And also remember to comment and let us know what you think, because your input is valuable and it may influence the topics that we cover on future episodes. Man, I'm getting good at this. I feel like I'm hitting my stride. Been doing this a while. It feels smooth. I feel like a radio host. Anyways, let's check the questions. Anything, last chance. I'm going to hit refresh a couple of more times while we sit in silence and I sip my coffee. But at 3:02, I'm going to turn this off if no one else has anything else to say. Oh, by the way, if you are an advertiser of the show, we would do another spiel at the end here to let people know you are a sponsor of this show. So if the content is something you feel appeals to people who might want to buy your product, or you just kind of like the vibe of the show and you want to participate and sponsor, I'm happy to include recommendations and comments and discussion about your product as part of the show. Like we said, advertising spots will appear both at the very end and in the middle. So if you want to be a sponsor of the show, let us know. We are going to be opening that up as soon as we hit all the media that we want to hit, because I want to make sure that if you're paying me to have an advertisement on the show, you get maximum benefit. So you would be on the live broadcast, you would be on the recording, you would be on the audio-only podcasts, and also you would be part of the announcements leading up to the live occurrence of the show. So lots of coverage once we get that going. So keep it in mind if you think you would want to be an advertiser. I'm going to hit refresh one more time, and if we have no more questions and comments, I'm going to turn this sucker off and leave you to your weekend. But it looks like we have none, so let me pop this up. Everybody, thanks for coming. It looks like we have a sizable audience here. Thanks, everybody, for paying attention. I really appreciate it. Joining me on a Friday. I know you probably have much more enjoyable things to do. I happened to drink 3 margaritas before I came here. Hopefully you haven't noticed. Hopefully the content's been great. But I encourage you to go enjoy a margarita yourself. It's a hot summer day. At least it is here in the southern U.S., wherever you may be. Have a great weekend, and we will see you next week. Adios. Thanks for coming. I'm not going to play the little applause noise like Zane usually does because I don't know where the button is for that. But thank you for coming. Give yourself a hand. Bye-bye. We'll see you next week.